Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel.
So before we get started with the video, I just thought I'd mention that I started filming this back in the summer of last year, but didn't get around to completing it until now. Now back to the program.
So I've been noticing as I was driving around the vehicle that I have some clunking noise as I'm turning the steering wheel. With the car on the ground, I was turning the steering wheel and you could still hear the clunking noise. So I have a feeling it is my tie rods. Hopefully it is not my steering rack and pinion. I really don't want to have to replace that whole thing, but according to research online, it doesn't usually go bad anyways, but the inner and outer tie rods do. So before I go ahead and order inner and outer tie rods, I want to make sure that that is what's wrong with it. So we're going to go through a few tests just to kind of confirm that it is that, and then I will basically order the parts and then I'll show you guys how to install them. But for now, let me show you the noise.
Alright guys, so I am inside the car right now. So as I'm sitting here, and I'm going to be turning the steering wheel. Basically, you turn it, wiggle it around, and you should be hearing some sort of clunking noise. Let's close the door first. So just kind of listen to this. So this is where I kind of found that it is really noisy, which got me leading, oh crap, there's something wrong with my steering or suspension. So I'm running through some tests right now just to confirm it. As you can hear, it's going clunk, 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 clunk. So that kind of indicates that it's possible that it is tie rods that's wrong. So next step, I'm going to jack up the car and wiggle the wheel around and also show you what the tie rod looks like and what might be wrong underneath the car. All right, so this is the driver's side wheel. So what you're going to be doing is basically holding it at the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock position and listening for some clunking noise. So as I'm wiggling it, I can feel and hear a little bit of clunking, which isn't really normal. So there is a little bit of play there, which gets me thinking the tie rods are probably gone. So another thing is just to turn the wheel all the way and inspect the tie rod. So with the wheel turned all the way, I'm going to just show you guys the inside. All right, so we're in here. So this here is the outer tie rod, and inside there, whoa, look, so you can see the boot is ripped on this, which gets me thinking that, you know, since it's worn out, it's old, this needs to be replaced, and probably the inner tie rod's bad as well. It's possible that a lot of dirt and crap got in there. So while you're kind of in here with this extended, well, you shouldn't be able to spin this very easily. So what I'm going to do is just twist it. As you can see, this is moving very easily. And you can hear that clunking noise. So the outer tie rod's definitely gone because there's too much movement in the ball joint up here, the ball joint here, because there shouldn't be so much movement. And then since this boot is ripped, you want to tug it back and forth just to see if there's any play within the inner tie rod, but really you can't tell unless you pop the outer tie rod off and have this arm loose, and then you can tug on it. So what I'm thinking is, yeah, the tie rod is gone on this side. So we'll go and look at the other side just to make sure that it's not just one side. Okay, so this is the passenger side. So what I'm going to do is also same kind of test, wiggle it back and forth from the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock positions. And right away you can hear the clunking noise. So there's still quite a bit of play just like the other side. Now upon closer inspection, if you're looking at this as well, this boot has also ripped. It's actually ripped right inside there. Again, you'd want to inspect the tie rod for movement. So you just kind of hold it and twist it back and forth. And yep, there's quite a bit of play in here. So that indicates bad tie rods. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go online, do some research, and actually order some new ones. And then after I order them, I'll show you guys how to install them. Now, this is today, so I guess a few months have passed. So today we're going to be working on the tie rods. I know anything that basically can fail on the car basically has failed, and I'm having to throw money in and fix basically everything. I mean, on the bright side, everything's going to be brand new and it's going to be nice and tight, but on the other side note is I'm dumping a lot of money on a car that I purchased. So I guess that's the perks of a project car, I guess. Well, anyways, guys, so today we're going to be working on the tie rods where I'm going to be replacing the inner, the outer, and the boots. So I have to shout out to my connection in the auto parts industry because it took him a lot of effort to be able to get me all these parts. I know we could have ordered some random parts online, but these are some pretty good quality parts, at least what he tells me, and we're going to be putting these in the car today. So let's just get to work. All right, guys, so to do the tie rods, it's pretty straightforward. You undo, obviously, the tie rod bolt here. Depending on what you're doing, I'm doing both the inner and outer. So what I'm going to do is just remove it from the inner side so I get the full length of how it is and basically adjust my new ones to that length. How you do this is, yeah, you remove that, and as you can see, this is just floppy. It's just not staying. So inner tie rod's definitely gone. The ball joint on this thing is definitely gone. So now you basically crawl under there. You gotta undo the boot because I guess the bolt to remove the inner tie rod is underneath the boot. So I'm just gonna go crawl under and take a look. So here is the boot to the inner tie rod. So you can see it's held on by this little bracket here, which you could unscrew and reuse for your new boot. My boots are already cracked, so I'm replacing everything. The inner tie rod, the boot, and the outer tie rod. So I'm just going to disconnect everything from the inner tie rod. So I'm just going to remove this and I'll show you guys what it looks like. Alright guys, so I managed to detach the boot. It was ripped, so I ripped it all the way and exposed this area. This is the area where you have to kind of undo the inner tie rod. There's a lock washer in here, which you need to kind of hammer out if you can. They have two little tabs that poke into the steering rack anyways, and they're supposed to snap off if you do remove them. If you can, you could try to tap this out. It makes it easier to unlock, but otherwise you might just have to twist this off and break the little tabs just so that you can get it off. I'm going to try and see if I can hammer it out, but if not, I'm just going to twist it off. All right, so here's the arm. I just took a 19mm wrench, put it in here, and just twisted it off. It was too hard to just tap this washer out, so I just broke the tabs. It's fine. I have replacements anyways, and you're supposed to replace that lock washer. So basically just twist it and it'll come right off. It's not very tight. All right, so here's all my replacement tie rod parts. So what I'm gonna do is basically match this up. Pull this off. And I believe that washer's still on there. There it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match up basically end to end the length. So from here all the way to here. So just gotta match it up exactly the same, and that should be good enough. So what I'm doing here is making sure that when the new tie rods are assembled, they are the same length as the old ones. I use the marker and mark the position so I know where to adjust the tie rods to. All right guys, so this is the inner tie rod put in. I've tightened it down with a 17mm wrench. It's supposed to be about 40 foot-pounds, so you know, I just whatever felt like 40 foot-pounds. And then now I just have to, I guess, fold these washers, the lock washer in. And I noticed this. It feels like basically exactly how the original one felt like. Kind of loose, but not really loose. I mean, it's still holding, right? So I'm thinking maybe it was just the outer tie rods that were bad. I'm not really sure how often the inner ones go bad. I'm just gonna basically hammer those the washer in, and then grease this, put the boot on, and then put the new outer tie rod on. So I struggle with folding the washer. As you can see, that one side is not folded. So I've got one side folded. I think that's good enough, honestly. This is not gonna go anywhere, and if it does try to back out, it has one side holding onto it, and the prongs will be holding it in place. So I'm just gonna leave it like this and put the boot on and grease it up. Alright guys, so I've got the boot installed and everything. It was very difficult to get the boot over. This is the passenger side. It was very difficult to like squeeze it over. So one thing that I noticed is basically you turn your wheel all the way so that this compresses all the way. Then you're able to just like move it around and get the boot in there. And once it's in, you just kind of zip tie it. I tried to use the OE clamp, which I managed to replace that little bolt that was kind of rusted out and stripped, but it just kept slipping. These zip ties actually have some teeth in there on the bottom that kind of bite right onto there. So I preferred using the zip tie over the OE clamp. The same with the front end. This is all done now. So if you can see, this is how it is. I haven't really torqued anything down yet. There's a zip tie also in the front of the boot, which as well has teeth to bite into it. So I preferred using the zip tie. All right, there you go. The tie rod for the driver's side is in. So the boot back here was brutal to get on. The only way I could think of to get this on was to basically pry one part of it up into here. So it was the same for both sides. The boot was really, really difficult to get on. So what you do is turn the steering all the way so that it is compressing the boot. Once the boot's compressed, you pry up one of these sides over the lip here, and then slowly rotate the boot and pry on a little bit while rotating the boot. Eventually the whole thing will slip on. It takes a little bit of effort to get that, but basically you have to get the initial lip on there first, and then you would just rotate and use a flathead screwdriver and slowly just pry a little bit at a time, and eventually it'll just, fold right over. So it was the same on the other side. Brutal. The boot was probably the most difficult. Well, actually, I would say the washer. Flattening the washer was probably the most difficult part. Aside from that, this is all done. There is the whole new tie rod, inner and outer, and the boot. So all that's left is basically a alignment and should be good to go. But I'm still waiting on coilovers, but after the coilovers, then it's alignment time. Tie rods are done, guys. So that was a lot of work. If I were to do this again, I'd pull the steering rack out to do. The reason being is there's just not enough space in the wheel well for you to do all the work. I mean, yes, you could probably remove the tie rod using the tie rod tool if you had it, and that would spin the tie rod off, but just kind of folding those lock washers was an impossible task to do while inside the wheel well. I mean, I managed to get one side, both sides folded, but it's not perfectly folded. It's just kind of creased a little bit. And then the other side, I only managed to get one side of the washer folded. So I don't think it's going to move anyways, but it was very difficult. And not to mention the boots, just sliding the boots onto the steering rack was just so difficult because the boots are so tight, which is a good thing because you don't want the boots to be loose, but it was just a lot of effort. But the install is done now. I managed to do it with it in the car, but you would save hours of time if you just pulled the steering rack out. So that's just my advice for you guys. It's not hard to pull the steering rack. It's just a few bolts disconnected from the inside of the car and it drops right out. So, if you guys would do it, I would recommend that. Anyways, guys, that was the install. If you haven't already, please comment, like, and subscribe. And as always, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.